Part 46. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 451. Chapter 451 The Frightened Bird. Her emotions were very complicated. On the one hand, she felt that Ms. Ye was just bringing it upon herself. Who told her to be unfaithful to her husband? You deserve all this suffering. On the other hand, seeing Miss Ye kneeling in front of her husband with blood and tears and pleading, it aroused Zhou's mother's compassion as a woman. It is not easy for a woman to get pregnant, no matter what is in her belly. No matter whose seed a child is, mothers cherish it very much. She went into the kitchen and poured a glass of warm water for Xiaoling. Xiaoling took it and held it in her hand. It was already the end of summer, but the weather was still very hot. The air conditioner was on indoors, and Xiaoling's fingertips were as cold as room temperature. After returning here and calming down, Xiaoling felt scared. This miscarriage was so critical. As long as there was a slight mistake, the child would not be saved. Her hands were shaking slightly, so much that she could no longer hold the water glass. She sadly discovered that, in fact, she was the same in this life as in her previous life. She was still unable to resist under Pei Xian's tyrannical pressure. Even if he knelt down without dignity and begged, whether he would let her go or not would depend on him. Mood. In front of him, she could protect nothing. Ms. Ye, please drink some hot water. Seeing her dazed with the water cup, Zhou's mother couldn't help but said, "You just came all the way from the hospital to replenish your fluids. I'll make you lunch right now." What to eat? She looked up as if she was startled, looked at Zhou's mother, and shook her head. "Don't know?" "Then I will stew a black fish for you to replenish your body," Zhou Ma said. "I won't eat," Xiaoling said, her voice a little hoarse. "I'm going upstairs to sleep for a while, don't call me." After saying that, she walked upstairs, leaving only her back to Zhou's mother. Zhou's mother looked at her, but hesitated to speak. In the end, she just sighed. Xiaoling doesn't want to see Zhou's mother. As soon as she saw that face, she would remember how the servant who had served her for 2 lifetimes smiled with concern and diligently persuaded her to eat food laced with abortion pills. That's an abortion pill. Xiaoling was lying on the luxurious and soft bed, gently stroking her belly with one hand, and tears were about to flow out again. "Baby, I'm sorry." She murmured that it was because she was so useless as a mother that she almost killed it. She fell asleep in a daze and had nightmares. "I dreamed that there was something wrong with the food I ate. As soon as I ate it, I felt severe pain in my stomach, a lot of donated blood came out, and the child was aborted." She woke up screaming from her dream, with tears on her face. A few seconds later, the bedroom door was pushed open, and it was Pei Xian who broke in. Pei Xian learned that she was discharged from the hospital in the morning, and he had clearly decided not to pick her up, but for some reason, he was restless during the whole morning meeting, and all he could think about was her. As soon as the meeting ended, he hurried back without even eating lunch. "We haven't seen each other for nearly a month, and I don't know if she has gained weight or lost weight." Stepping into the house, he was asking Zhou's mother about her situation. Before he could say a few words, he heard a scream from the bedroom upstairs. Pei Xian took 3 steps in succession and rushed forward. "I thought something had happened to Xiaoling, so I opened the door and took a look and breathed a sigh of relief. Xiaoling was fine in bed. She was probably frightened because of a nightmare. But, in the next moment, he saw her face clearly. Too haggard, like a withered rose that has lost its vitality. What has she suffered in the past month? Why are you so embarrassed? How did Chu Chen and those servants take care of her, and how could they let her end up like this?" Pei Xian was both distressed and angry, but he looked at her silently, his expression as usual. When Xiaoling saw it was him, she shrank toward the bedside with some vigilance. The two looked at each other for a long time, and then Pei Ziyan closed the bedroom door and walked out. Xiaoling smiled to herself inwardly. It seemed that when she was having a bad life, suffering and having nightmares, Pei Ziyan would no longer comfort her as gently as before. After all, the child in her belly was not his, and the ability to tolerate the existence of the child was probably his limit. How can he be expected to treat their mother and son well? Xiaoling still doesn't know the gender of her unborn child. She forgot to ask the doctor when she was hospitalized last time. Although she had hoped to be a girl, she dreamed that she was holding a little boy with Lilei. Could it be that the baby in her belly was actually a boy? She lowered her head and guessed for a while, then fell asleep again. I slept for a long time and woke up only after dinner. I was woken up by hunger. She remembered that she hadn't even eaten lunch, so she went downstairs and went to the restaurant. In the restaurant, Pei Ziyan was already dining. Under the dim yellow and soft lights, the grilled foie gras and fried beef bones on the wooden table gave off an attractive aroma. They were both Pei Ziyan's favorite dishes. Seeing Xiaoling coming down, Pei Ziyan only glanced at her lightly, then lowered his head and continued to eat by himself. Xiaoling paused in her steps, feeling in a dilemma. Zhou's mother greeted her, "Miss Ye, come and eat quickly." She diligently opened the seat for Xiaoling and placed the table where she liked. "There is sea cucumber soup in the kitchen. It will be stewed soon. Please wait a moment and I will serve it to you." Sea cucumber soup is also Pei Ziyan's favorite food. It seems that there are no dishes prepared for her today. She guessed that Pei Ziyan wished that the child in her belly could be aborted as soon as possible. Although he had promised not to force her to have an abortion, if the diet could not keep up and the child aborted naturally, no one would be blamed. Xiaoling felt sad when she thought about it. The nightmare from her nap came back again, and she thought of the abortion pill and the boundless sea of blood. Zhou's mother brought the sea cucumber soup and said with a smile, "Miss Ye, drink it while it's hot. Sea cucumbers are nutritious and good for children." The scene in front of me coincides with the scene at that time. Could this steaming bowl of sea cucumber soup also contain abortion pills? Although she knew it was impossible, Pei Ziyan had promised her not to touch the child, but she couldn't pass the threshold in her heart. She looked pale and couldn't help but push away the dishes. "Miss Ye, what's wrong with you?" Zhou's mother was surprised. "I won't eat it," Xiaoling said. Pei Ziyan raised his head slightly and glanced at her, then continued to eat by himself without speaking. As long as she doesn't die, it's none of his business whether the child in her belly dies or not, whether he likes it or not. Zhou's mother was worried when she saw that Pei Ziyan didn't persuade her. Even if Miss Ye made a mistake, she couldn't abuse her body like this while she still had one in her belly. So, only Zhou's mother had the courage to persuade, "Miss, you should eat something. I'm sorry for what happened last time, but you can't torture yourself like this. If you don't think about yourself, you also have to think about what's in your belly." Pei Ziyan's knife and fork collided with the porcelain plate, making a crisp sound. It was only then that Zhou Ma realized that her words to persuade Miss Ye might have violated her husband's taboo, so she quickly shut up and lowered her head. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 452. Chapter 452, Stubborn. Xiaoling sneered softly, "I don't dare to eat what you cook just for the sake of my children." Not only did she not dare to eat, she even dared not touch the ready-made ingredients in the kitchen at home. No matter how nervous she was, she didn't want the baby in her belly to have any more mishaps. She stood up and left the restaurant. "I am very hungry, the kind that burns my heart and lungs." She went to the room to find a heavy coat and wrapped it around herself, put on sunglasses, covering most of her face, and went to a nearby supermarket to buy some things. Unopened mineral water, instant noodles, ham, milk, etc. After taking it back to the villa, She went into the kitchen and turned on the gas stove, intending to heat it up and eat it. Ma Jo felt very distressed when she saw this. How can pregnant women eat these things? I wanted to persuade her, but found that I had already lost the qualification to persuade her. Sir, why don't you find a new servant? Jo Ma said to Pei Zion cruelly. Monsieur doesn't trust me. If I find a new servant, maybe she will be willing to eat. This is not something you should worry about. Pei Zion's voice was low. As a result, Joe's mother did not dare to speak, but she blamed herself extremely in her heart. She was the one who was sorry for Monsieur. Actually, Pei Zion knew very well that it would be the same if he replaced 10,000 servants. As long as he, Pei Zion, arranged the servants, they would not gain Xiaoling's trust. His Xiaoling may be foolish sometimes, but she is very clear-headed about some things. She must know that every injustice has its own debtor, and Joe's mother cannot be blamed for the abortion pill. Xiaoling is having a temper with him. Pei Zion was unhappy and didn't even try to persuade her. He watched Xiaoling cooking with cold eyes. She was clumsy and accidentally knocked over the pot, the boiling water splashed out, and there was a loud bang that shook the world. The kitchen was in a mess, and all the ingredients she bought were wasted. Xiaoling only felt pain in her hand. When she raised it, she saw a big blister on her thin wrist. She stared blankly at the blisters and the mess on the floor. Suddenly she felt that she was so stupid. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't even cook a meal. How could she be worthy of the baby in her belly? The more she thought about it, the more she felt sad. She felt wronged and helpless. She seemed to have lost all her strength. She hugged her injured hand and slowly squatted down. Pei Zion looked at all this with cold eyes and whispered something to Jo Ma. Not long after, Joe's mother brought a medicine box. Pei Zion opened it and rummaged through it to find disinfectant, gauze, and other things. Regardless of the mess on the floor, he walked to Xiaoling and squatted down. Show me your hands. Xiaoling retracted her hand, lowered her head, and said with a nasal sound, I don't want you to worry about it. Pei Zion frowned, the skin will leave scars. Xiaoling's body trembled slightly, and she suddenly understood why Pei Zion, who had not said a word to her since she came home today, suddenly became concerned about her injury. She raised her head and looked at Pei Zion with red eyes. Pei Zion, do you only care about whether there will be scars on my hands? You don't care about the child's life or death at all, she cried, her whole body about to collapse. I hate you, I hate you. The mood of a pregnant woman is inherently unstable, not to mention that she has suffered so many stimuli. Pei Zion was unhappy, but he couldn't bear to argue with her. He took her hand forcefully and gave her medicine. After applying the medicine, wrap it with a white bandage. Xiaoling couldn't fight him off, so she was forced to bandage the wound. Tears still flowed down her face. Her shoulders were shaking from crying, and her body curled up into a small ball, terrified and helpless. I'll take you out to eat. Pei Zion hated seeing her cry the most, but he still couldn't bear it and said. Xiaoling shook her head desperately, whimpering, and pushed him out. Go away. The little tenderness and compassion that Pei Zion had just felt suddenly disappeared. He left Xiaoling and stood up, and coldly told Joe's mother, don't worry about her, just let her starve to death. The worry in Joe's mother's eyes was even worse, but she couldn't persuade her and she was so anxious that she stamped her feet. Xiaoling was still hungry after all. After crying for a while, she went out to buy dinner again. She still went to the same supermarket as before, but this time she bought a frozen lunchbox. She didn't dare to take it back and heat it herself, so she asked the clerk for help. Unexpectedly, the store clerk recognized him. Yasin Ling, are you Yasin Ling? The clerk said excitedly, can you sign your name for me? Xiaoling was startled. The clerk's voice was so loud that several nearby customers turned to look at her. It is human nature to watch celebrities. Many people's eyes were shining and they gathered around her in twos and threes. Xiaoling saw that the situation was not good, so she ran out without even asking for a sandwich. After running a few steps, she found that her stomach started to hurt again, which was a terrible pain for pregnant women. She turned pale with shock and regretted running away. She hurriedly stopped a taxi on the side of the road and repeatedly said to the driver, "Go to Huaxin Maternal and Infant Hospital." The driver quickly took her to the hospital and emergency room. There is no need for a senior professor like Mr. Zhang to be on duty at nighttime emergency department. The patient was treated by a young doctor. Recognizing her celebrity face, he was excited and happy. However, the young doctor had known for a long time that Ye Ling had her card set up at her own hospital. She had been doing prenatal checkups here and would also give birth here in the future. So, it wasn't too surprising to see her. Although she was excited, she maintained good professionalism and carefully examined her. "There are slight signs of miscarriage, Miss Ye, you should never do strenuous exercise again," the young doctor said. "I suggest you go to the hospital immediately to preserve the miscarriage, and wait until Mr. Zhang goes to work tomorrow morning to give you a more detailed diagnosis and treatment. Everything about children is a big deal." Xiaoling nodded, followed the doctor's advice, and was admitted to the hospital again. She was obviously discharged from the hospital this morning. "I want to eat something in the ward," she said to the head nurse who came to check her condition with some embarrassment. "I haven't eaten lunch or dinner." The head nurse was startled. "How can you not take good care of yourself in a situation like yours? Eating 3 meals on time is the most basic thing. You can't do this anymore." Xiaoling listened obediently. The head nurse turned around and went out. After a while, he brought her a lunch box and said, "It's midnight, and the hospital canteen has long been closed. The nearby small restaurants are full of waste oil. You can't eat it randomly. If you don't mind it, just eat my meal. I worked an all-night shift today, and my husband made it for me as a late-night snack. It's very clean." Xiaoling was very grateful. She thanked her and took the lunch box. Opening it, it is a very simple home-cooked dish, stir-fried wild rice and fungus meat slices. However, Xiaoling could tell that they were really carefully cooked. Every piece of wild rice and meat slices were cut evenly in thickness and had all the color, flavor. Taste it, it tastes good too. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 453. Chapter 453 Feng Kun's Invitation. Xiaoling raised her head and thanked the head nurse again. "It's delicious." Then, the professional smile on the head nurse's face faded, revealing a sincere and warm smile. "Yeah, I also think it tastes good. My husband didn't know anything when he first got married. In the past few years, because I worked day and night, so he learned everything, and now he cooks all the meals at home." Maybe she was lonely on the night shift, so she simply stayed by Xiaoling's bedside, taking care of her meals and chatting about home affairs. "My husband doesn't make much money, and he can't even pay the mortgage at home. But he can't even pay the mortgage, he is so kind to me, he does all the dirty work, and he has never made me suffer in the slightest after we have been married for so many years." The head nurse said and smiled. "I'm satisfied too." Xiaoling envied her very much. She was able to stay with her beloved for a long time, and the years were peaceful. What more could she ask for? Thinking of the man she loved far away, she felt a slight pain in her heart. The head nurse asked her, "Why did you come to the hospital alone? You didn't ask Mr. Pei to follow you. Is he not at home? I see him often in the news, flying here and there, running around." She thought Xiaoling he has a very good relationship with Pei Zion. In fact, almost everyone in the outside world thinks so. Otherwise, how could Pei Xian overcome all difficulties and marry a wife with no family background? This has no precedent in the entire Pei family. Xiaoling didn't want to explain. After finishing her meal, she excused herself because she was tired. The head nurse was afraid of disturbing her, so she packed her lunchbox and left. When she turned off the lights in the ward, she felt a little distressed when she saw her thin figure huddled in the dark. Being with rich people is not as good as imagined. What a blessing. The man is so busy, and it must be very hard for Ms. Ye to be alone. Unconsciously, she felt sympathy for Xiaoling. Xiaoling stayed in the hospital for one night. The next day, Mr. Zhang came to work and did a more detailed examination on her. It's okay, but she can't run around casually from now on. His statement was the same as the doctor on duty yesterday. Xiaoling breathed a sigh of relief. Lao Zhang prescribed anti-fetal medicine for her. Seeing that she was unhappy, he asked, "Did you quarrel with Mr. Pei?" Because he knew the secret of the child's life experience. He was not like the others. She and Pei Xian would have a good relationship in the future. Xiaoling smiled bitterly. In front of this amiable doctor, she spoke a little more. "I'm afraid he will put medicine in the rice, so I don't dare to eat it. She was hospitalized a while ago, in Sinning." However, Mr. Zhang looked through her medical records this morning and understood what she had been through a while ago. At this time, he comforted her. "Fortunately, the child is fine. You can stay here for a few more days, stay in the hospital to eat, and calm down." Xiaoling continued to be hospitalized. Huaxin Maternal and Infant Hospital is one of the best hospitals in the city, and beds are always in short supply. She was admitted temporarily this time, and the special care wards were all full. There was no vacancy, so she was placed in the general ward. The double room is very clean. The patient in the bed next to her was discharged from the hospital yesterday and is vacant at this time. Xiaoling lived quietly in the hospital. She ate hospital meals for lunch, which tasted terrible, but at least the nutrition was balanced and she could take care of the baby in her belly. Unfortunately, such simple happiness did not last long. In the evening, a pregnant woman lived in the bed next to her, also here to protect her fetus. The pregnant woman was an ordinary person. She was extremely excited when she saw Xiaoling. She kept chattering and pestering her with questions. It was only then that Xiaoling fully realized the troubles of being a star. She could no longer live in this ward. Xiaoling went to ask Mr. Zhang, "Is the special care ward still empty?" Mr. Zhang was also in a dilemma. "No, it will take at least another week." As the two were talking, someone knocked gently on the door of the doctor's office. Xiaoling turned around and saw that it was her driver. She asked, "Why are you here?" "Ms. Ye," the driver said, "the sir asked me to take you home." She ran out without saying hello yesterday. Pei Xian was very angry and originally didn't want to care about her, but when he calmed down he couldn't really let her go. He was worried about her being alone outside, and he was even more worried when he heard that he was staying in a general ward, so he sent a driver to pick her up. Xiaoling didn't want to go back at first, but the ward was nervous, so she had no choice but to go back with the driver. Looking at this, Zhang Lazai shook his head. What a bad fate, what a bad fate. After returning home, Xiaoling still didn't dare to eat the food cooked by Zhou's mother. "I went to the kitchen to wash the vegetables, beat an egg, and boiled it with plain water." Her cooking skills were taught by Li Lei and she didn't learn them well. Fortunately, although she was in a hurry this time, she didn't overturn the whole pot like last time. While she was cooking vegetables, she was thinking about Li Lei in her heart. Amidst the mist, her eyes were misty and she wanted to cry. The bowl of noodles was half cooked, so she made do with it. Zhou's mother saw this and felt very distressed. She wanted to help but couldn't, and watched helplessly as Xiaoling ate a bowl of half-cooked noodles. She ran to Pei Zian and said, "Sir, do you really not care about Miss Guan? How will her body be able to bear it if she continues like this?" After bringing Xiaoling back, Pei Zian returned to his indifferent attitude towards her. At this time, he said in a calm voice, "Let her go, she won't die." This man was quite cruel when he was cruel, and he treated others. The child has no sympathy at all. At night, Xiaoling's stomach felt uncomfortable all night, and she went to the hospital again the next day. She was always running around the hospital these days, going back and forth, and she lost weight again. Lao Zhang looked at her and said, "You're not sick. Just have a good meal and you'll be fine." Sent her off sympathetically. Xiaoling felt depressed and returned to the car. The driver said, "Ms. Yeah, let me buy you some food." She shook her head and refused. She didn't trust anyone around Pei Zian. The driver's cell phone rang. He answered the call for a while, put down the phone, and said to Xiaoling, "Miss Ye, Mr. Feng Kun has something to ask you. Please go to the Emperor Company." "Do you want to go?" "Feng Kun. What will happen at this time?" Xiaoling is a little confused. Due to her health, she has stopped recording songs recently and is in a pure recuperation stage. However, doubts remain doubts. She knew that Feng Kun was not someone who was looking for trouble, so she agreed to go to the Emperor. When she arrived at the Emperor, everyone who came and went turned to look at her. She was 5 months pregnant. Although her belly was not big, she still showed a bit of pregnancy. She was barefaced and wearing a pair of flat shoes. She walked carefully and slowly along the wall. In the midst of the huge crowd and everyone, even though the Emperor looked extremely glamorous, she was an unexpected anomaly. All kinds of eyes fell on her, including envious ones, jealous ones, and flattering ones. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 454. Chapter 454 Silent Love. Facing these gazes, Xiaoling walked into Feng Kun's office. Feng Kun had been waiting for her in the office for a long time. When he saw her coming in, he quickly helped her and sat down on the soft sofa nearby. He gave her 2 more cushions to rest on her waist. He looked at her carefully and found that she was much haggard, pale, thin, and heart-wrenching. Feng Kun said, "Xiaoling, you have suffered a lot during this time." Xiaoling shook her head and smiled reluctantly, "For the sake of the child, it's worth the hard work." Feng Kun asked, "Does Pei Zian know the identity of the child?" He went to see Mr. Zhang, who said that Xiaoling had been given abortion pills some time ago. With Pei Zian's protection, how could Xiaoling make such a big mistake? Feng Kun guessed that maybe it was Pei Zian who did it. As expected, Xiaoling was silent for a moment, nodded, and told him what happened a few days ago. Although the matter has passed, Feng Kun is still frightened when he hears it, but more importantly, he feels sorry for Xiaoling and is angry at Pei Zian, that beast. How could he do such a thing that is worse than a beast? This child is not him. Yes, he is not qualified to decide for you whether to have an abortion. It is against human ethics for him to do so. What are we talking about human relations with Pei Zian? Xiaoling said bitterly. Feng Kun also knew that he was too excited and that just getting angry could not solve the problem. He forced himself to calm down and then spoke to Xiaoling again, "Yes, don't get angry with that beast. You have to take good care of yourself." Ask Xiaoling again, "Have you not eaten well in the past 2 days?" Xiaoling was slightly startled, "How do you know?" Feng Kun said, "That's why I asked you to come here today." He turned around and took out a thermos box from the storage cabinet, which contained steaming meals. "This is the food I cooked myself. I don't know if it suits your taste. You can try some of it." Xiaoling suddenly saw this and was very moved and surprised. "Why did you suddenly think of cooking for me?" Feng Kun said, "You haven't come to the company for many days. I can only inquire about you through Chu Chen and Pei Zion, but I can't trust them. So, yesterday I went to the hospital and found Mr. Zhang. Tell me you don't dare to eat from Pei Zion's place, so I thought of cooking something for you. Xiaoling was even more moved after hearing this. She felt that the most worthwhile thing in her previous life was making friends like Feng Kun. She sniffed and lowered her head to look at the dishes. They were meatballs and vegetable porridge that were easy to digest. Just looking at the color made people want to eat. Feng Kun said, if you like it, you can come to the company to eat every day in the future, and I will bring it to you every day. Xiaoling nodded and said, okay. The food is so delicious that it almost melts in your mouth, so delicious that you can't help but feel it. It had been a long time since she had been late for such a delicious, nutritious meal. After a while, she had eaten it all. Her stomach finally felt better, and the faint feeling of hunger subsided. After finishing her meal, she smiled at Feng Kun and said, thank you. Feng Kun also smiled kindly. We have known each other for so many years, what are you so polite about? He then asked her, does it taste good? What do you think it tastes like? Does it need to be improved? Xiaoling said, it tastes very good, it's really strange. She looked suddenly hesitant. What's strange? Feng Kun carefully concealed a hint of nervousness in his expression. Xiaoling said, I rarely eat the food you cook, but I don't know why, but I feel that this taste is a bit familiar and cordial. Xiaoling was silent for a moment, then smiled, maybe it's because we know each other so well. Long time. Feng Kun then breathed a sigh of relief quietly. We are good friends, he said. Get up, clear the lunchbox on the table, and pour a glass of warm water for her to drink. But he was thinking in his heart, it was so dangerous, but fortunately there was no help. How could he cook these meals himself? It was clearly Li Lei, who hurriedly prepared it and brought it over, begging him to serve it to Xiaoling. Li Lei has always been concerned about her condition. Yesterday, the person who went to Huaxin Mother and Infant Hospital to find Mr. Zhang was not Feng Kun at all, but Li Lei. Mr. Zhang heard about his purpose and roughly knew that the man in front of him was the child's biological father. Although he could not tell him the child's life experience, he did reveal the news that Xiaoling was not able to eat well. Li Lei was very distressed. He didn't know that she had been given abortion pills. He only thought that she had a severe reaction during pregnancy and was a picky eater, so she didn't eat well. He racked his brains, cooked dishes in various ways, and asked Feng Kun to deliver them. Afraid that she would refuse to eat after finding out, Li Lei didn't even dare to cook his usual dishes, so he deliberately learned new dishes with good intentions. He also told Feng Kun that it was best for Xiaoling to eat the meals he sent for 3 meals a day. He specially asked a nutritionist to prepare a meal that could balance the diet of pregnant women. Feng Kun's mood was very complicated and he asked Li Lei, aren't you jealous that Xiaoling is pregnant with someone else's child now? Li Lei looked gloomy and was silent for a long time before saying, no matter what, I hope she has a good life. What he did for Xiaoling, maybe Xiaoling will never know. Feng Kun couldn't help but sigh, how difficult it was for the two of them to fall in love, how wonderful it would be if Pei Zion didn't interfere. If the person Xiaoling met at the beginning was Li Lei, would everything be different? Unfortunately, there is no if. From that day on, Xiaoling thought about going to Feng Kun for dinner every day. However, Pei Zion disagreed. She is his woman, she must have breakfast with him every morning, wait for his return at night, and have dinner with him, these are the rules. Xiaoling can't eat the food cooked by her mother, maybe because she is too resistant. Sometimes, she will feel nauseous after taking one bite, just like she did when she was pregnant, and she will vomit it out. But, even then, Pei Zion did not allow her to get off the table. He ordered Zhou's mother to give her a glass of water and asked her to stay at the table and wait for him to finish. This man has a kind of calm madness when he becomes cruel. Xiaoling was worried about the baby in her belly and did not dare to carry it with him. In the early morning, she reluctantly had breakfast with him and took the car to Emperor. Then she went to find Feng Kun to eat her share of breakfast. In the evening, she would eat a little early at Feng Kun's side, then go home and continue to have dinner with Pei Xian. Sometimes I feel hungry at night, so I use a small locked cabinet to stock up on some sealed biscuits to eat. Pei Xian saw it and didn't care about her. His mind is on another thing. Soon, it will be Chinese Valentine's Day. On the day of Chinese Valentine's Day, in the early morning, the sky was clear and cloudless, and the clear sunlight shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the entire wall, shining on the luxurious bed of the two people in the villa. Pei Xian stood up from the bed, pointed to a set of beautifully packaged clothes on the bedside, and said to Xiaoling, "Put them on, and let's go get the marriage certificate." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 455. Chapter 455, Marriage on Chinese Valentine's Day. Xiaoling was originally sleeping in a daze, but because of his words, she suddenly woke up. During this period of time, she was still pregnant and had so many things on her mind that she had forgotten that there was still this hurdle waiting for her. She bit her lip and gathered her courage. "When you said you wanted to get the certificate, you didn't know that my child was." She felt guilty, cautious, and her voice was as low as a mosquito. "So, we don't need to give birth to a child now. We're married, see if you can." No, Pei Xian knew that she didn't want to go get the certificate, so he interrupted her coldly, "Put on your clothes and go." Xiaoling's heart sank, and she tried to make a desperate struggle. "If you get the certificate, he will be your eldest son in name. Why would you give this title to a child who is destined not to inherit the family business?" Pei Xian suddenly turned around and looked at her gloomily. "Xiaoling, listen carefully, you promised me that you would send the child away after it was born. I don't care if it is a boy or a girl. After it is secretly sent away, I will announce the death of the child, the eldest son. It doesn't matter anymore." Xiaoling's heart felt cold. Announcing the news of her death? I didn't expect that this was what he had in mind. However, if you think about it carefully, for Pei Xian, this is the best of all methods. It will remove the firepower from the bottom of the cauldron and leave no possibility of being robbed of the family property. And she will also be married. Xiaoling murmured, "I don't want to get married." Pei Xian said coldly, "You want to break the contract? It doesn't matter, I can break the contract too." Breaking a contract, destroying a child. Xiaoling hated him most for threatening her with the child, but there was no way she could do it. There was a mist in her eyes and she said, "Pei Xian, why are you so mean and always forcing me to do things I don't want to do? Weren't you very willing to marry me before?" Pei Xian said calmly, "In order to achieve your goal, you even killed my fiancé. Now I want to marry you as you wish. Want to escape? Impossible." His tone was gloomy, as if he came from the abyss of hell. Xiaoling fell silent, knowing that she was unable to resist. Pei Xian pointed to the beautifully packaged clothes on the bedside and said, "Change into them." Her hands were shaking slightly, and she opened the set of clothes, only to see a very exquisite little dress inside, with deep and light red embroidery blooming like roses, and gorgeous and sparkling diamonds at the corners of the skirt, which was expensive and luxurious. Although it was just a marriage certificate and no banquet, Pei Xian obviously took it very seriously. She took her clothes and went to the bathroom, closed the door, and put them on. Looking at myself in the mirror, my originally pale face became a little more colorful against the backdrop of the red dress, giving me a bride-like appearance. Her hair on the temples was like clouds, beautiful and charming. When she was very young in her last life, she had dreamed of the day she would marry him. Fantasy about what you will look like at that time. Isn't it very beautiful? wearing the most beautiful dress, becoming the happiest person in the world. But, nowadays, clothes may be the most beautiful. She is the most unfortunate person in the world. She lingered in the bathroom for a long time, until Peizian urged her, and then she walked out slowly. Peizian looked at her with a flash of surprise in his eyes. "You are beautiful," he said. At this time, he has also changed his clothes. It is a finely crafted suit, the color is very pure starry black, and the extremely elegant burgundy tie, with a diamond tie clip, looks gentle and elegant. If there is an unsuspecting little girl here, she will definitely be fascinated by him. He took her hand, walked downstairs step by step, and got into the Rolls-Royce. Unusually, a red rose with water was placed in the Rolls-Royce carriage today. The driver smiled and said, "Sir, Monsieur, congratulations." Peizian was in a good mood and said to the driver, "I will call you madam from now on." The driver was very knowledgeable and immediately said with a smile, "Yes, congratulations, madam." Peizian gave him a big red envelope. The driver took it with a smile on his face, said a lot of auspicious words, and drove steadily. Xiaoling's mood was very low. She knew she couldn't resist, so she stayed silent all the way. Peizian said nothing more and just held her hand tightly. Xiaoling's fingers were cold, and her stomach ached again. She said, "Peizian, I don't feel well." Peizian frowned imperceptibly and said warmly, "Lean on my shoulder and rest for a while. We'll be there soon." Xiaoling said, "I have a stomachache and I need to go to the hospital." Peizian thought she was pretending, so he held her hand with force. She cried out in pain, and he slowly let her go again. Peizian's voice was slightly deepened, "Xiaoling, no matter how uncomfortable you are, you can bear it with me. Today's marriage is finalized. Do you want to go to the hospital? Okay, I will take you after receiving the certificate. Go." So Xiaoling said nothing more. The dull pain in her lower abdomen gradually disappeared, and while she breathed a sigh of relief, she thought that the attack just now was just her hallucination. The car drove to the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau. On a good day like the Chinese Valentine's Day, many people come to get marriage certificates, and the Civil Affairs Bureau is surrounded by couples. Many reporters and fans knew that today was the day for Xiaoling to apply for a certificate, so they came early in the morning to squat nearby, and the crowds became even more bustling. With everyone watching, Peizian couldn't help but jump in line, so he ordered the driver to queue up and waited in the carriage with Xiaoling. Several bodyguards protected their Rolls-Royce and set up a cordon. The carriage was very quiet, perhaps too quiet, and the vague pain in Xiaoling's lower abdomen began to boil again. She felt uneasy. It turned out that the dull pain on the way here early in the morning was really not an illusion. At this moment, marriage was no longer on her mind. She said, "Peizian, I really want to go to the hospital." Peizian said, "We will be waiting in line soon." "I want to go to the hospital." Xiaoling looked at him angrily. Peizian's voice was cold, "Xiaoling, even if you want to die, you will die after we get the marriage certificate." Xiaoling felt a chill in her heart, as if it was the first day she met this man. She looked at him sadly, as at a stranger. The pain in her lower abdomen was getting worse. She was worried about her child's condition, and cold sweat broke out on her forehead. But Peizian still thought that she was pretending, or that he didn't care at all whether her stomach hurt or not. He just closed his lips tightly, held her hand coldly, and waited. In front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the long queue to get a marriage certificate moved slowly. After a while, the driver called, "Boss, it's your turn." Peizian went to help Xiaoling. Xiaoling struggled desperately and said, "I have a stomachache and I want to get off the car." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xiaoweiniang. Chapter 456. Chapter 456 Princess Hug. Pei Xian's voice was cold. Xiaoling, please be honest and register safely. I will send you to the hospital immediately. But if you do anything wrong, you will be responsible for the consequences. Xiaoling's pain was getting worse and worse, but she didn't dare to disobey Pei Xian's order. With his help, she got out of the car. The bodyguards had already set up a cordon, and the short walk from the entrance of the Rolls-Royce to the doorstep of the Civil Affairs Bureau was as lively as walking on a red carpet. There were people watching everywhere, including those who came to register their marriage on the day, reporters and paparazzi who came to grab the news, and many fans who came after hearing the news. Xiaoling kept her spirits high and did not show any pain in public. The charming little red dress on her body concealed her paleness. With her cloud-like hair and exquisite accessories, she looked like a happy bride-to-be walking beside the tall and handsome Pei Xian. Amid the screams, cheers, and blessings of the crowd, they walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau. Inside the Civil Affairs Bureau, it was actually very quiet, with no other people waiting around. Escorted by bodyguards, they walked into the formality cubicle, where there was only one clerk. The accompanying bodyguards pulled out chairs for Pei Xian and Xiaoling and asked them to take a seat. Seeing such a scene, the clerk couldn't help but sit more upright. He had just joined the job not long ago, and it was his first time to register a marriage for such a big shot. He was a little nervous and stammered, please sit down. Congratulations to you too, Ms. Yeah, you are so beautiful. Xiaoling's lower abdomen still hurt and she couldn't answer. Pei Xian's face darkened slightly. How dare this little clerk tease his woman? The clerk was frightened by his expression, and immediately became silent, and obediently handed over a blank marriage certificate. Please sign, he said. Pei Xian swiped a few times and signed his name on the certificate smoothly. Then, he handed the pen to Xiaoling and said, Xiaoling, it's your turn. Xiaoling's stomach pain became more severe, and cold sweat flowed down her forehead. She gritted her teeth and turned her lips white to prevent herself from moaning. Even the clerk at the registration office noticed something was wrong and asked with concern, Ms. Yeah, you don't seem to be feeling well. Does it matter? Can I get you a glass of hot water? Xiaoling didn't have the energy to answer, so she trembled and took the pen handed over by Pei Xian. For this reason, he would only send her to the hospital if she signed the marriage certificate early and sold herself. She was in so much pain that she couldn't think. Her whole body was in a daze. She felt warm and moist between her legs, maybe bleeding. This knowledge made her even more frightened. She tried to hold the pen several times before she managed to hold it. Cold sweat wetted her eyelashes. She wanted to write her name on the marriage certificate, but she couldn't muster any strength. Pei Xian looked at him coldly, don't pretend, it's useless. Xiaoling was in so much pain that she had difficulty breathing. The tip of the black pen drew a messy diagonal line on the marriage certificate. A surge of intense pain in her lower abdomen hit her overwhelmingly. She suddenly tilted her body and lost consciousness. Xiaoling. Ms. Yet. Everyone exclaimed in unison. Pei Xian quickly supported her with quick eyes and hands, lifted her thin body horizontally, and stretched out his hand to feel her breath. Fortunately, she was still breathing. Hurry, get in the car and go to the hospital, he told the driver and strode out. Hey, wait, the clerk called from behind the counter, what should I do about the marriage registration? Although Pei Xian just signed, the scratch that Miss Ye made before she fell into coma cannot be regarded as a signature. The clerk is in a dilemma. Should he input their marriage registration information into the system registration database? Can these two people be considered to have completed the marriage registration procedures? Pei Zion paused. "We are already married, please register it." The clerk was very embarrassed, "But Monsieur hasn't signed yet." So, Pei Zion turned around with Xiaoling in his arms, held her unconscious hand with one hand, and stuffed the black pen on the table into her hand with the other hand. Holding it, he scrawled and signed yet 3 words, Xingling. The little clerk's expression changed. "Right? This can also be a signature?" He stammered, This is illegal." "Didn't you see that she wrote it with a pen?" Pei Zion said impatiently and coldly. Isn't this a strong statement?" The clerk complained that he had never encountered such a situation before, and he was facing the most ruthless and powerful business giant in the world. He didn't know what to do for a moment. Pei Zion lowered his head and glanced at Xiaoling, who was unconscious. "Register, or you will be responsible for the consequences." Xiaoling was still in a coma and couldn't afford to delay. He had no time to talk nonsense with the clerk. The clerk was frightened by his gloomy tone and subconsciously said, "Yes." Pei Zion hugged Xiaoling and rushed out without looking back. Outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, there are still huge crowds of people. Countless crowds of people are waiting for them to return after receiving their certificates. Pei Zion took long strides and rushed forward. He paused slightly when he was about to leave the door. Then he gently turned Xiaoling's head to his arms, then raised his arms to protect her face. Then he took each step calmly. Walked out. Wow, yes, Xingling was actually carried out by Pei Zion. They are so loving. The crowd was excited, with shudder sounds and screams. No one noticed that Xiaoling had passed out. They all thought she was shy and refused to show her face. The way Pei Zion held her was so beautiful, almost like he was in an idol drama. His tall, straight figure in a formal suit looked even more like a against the light. The girl in his arms was dressed in a gorgeous dress, with long crow-green hair scattered around. A small section of the neck slightly exposed is as white as jade. Fans couldn't stand it because they said it was so eye-catching, they were such a perfect match, a match made in heaven. Only the casual bodyguards looked solemn. They opened the door for Pei Zion, escorted him and Xiaoling into the car, and closed the door immediately. Pei Zion said to the driver, "Drive now." The driver stepped on the accelerator and headed to the hospital as quickly as possible. Pei Zion rushed directly to the obstetrics and gynecology department with Xiaoling in his arms. The doctors at the obstetrics and gynecology department were also frightened by her condition and rushed to provide first aid. It was not easy before her vital signs stabilized. Pei Zion stood beside Xiaoling's hospital bed and held her hand tightly. At one time, he thought Xiaoling's stomachache was just faking, but he didn't expect it wasn't the case. Just now, the emergency doctor told him that the pregnant woman had some signs of miscarriage, possibly due to emotional stimulation. Pei Zion looked at her pale cheeks with dark eyes. After a long time, Xiaoling woke up from her coma. Hung on the bedside stand was a large bag of miscarriage lotion. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 457. Chapter 457 Wedding Candy. She looked at Pei Zion weakly and asked, "Is the child okay?" Pei Zion's expression was cold. He clearly cared for her just now, but when he heard her asking the evil one in her belly as soon as she woke up, his anger started to rise. "It's a pity that he's not dead," he said. Xiaoling didn't expect him to answer like this. Looking at him, tears flowed out. This little life was so difficult to come by, without the protection of his biological father, and under the eyes of other men. Can it really be saved? Seeing her cry, Pei Zion felt a little irritable. "The child has been saved, why are you crying?" "Xiaoling, I tell you, you are my wife now, don't shed tears for irrelevant people." "I'm not your wife," Xiaoling said weakly. Pei Zion said, "Everything is signed on the marriage certificate." I didn't sign, Xiaoling said stubbornly. You signed it. Pei Ziyan took out the marriage certificate and opened it to her. On it, the three words Ye Xingling were clearly visible. Black ink handwriting. Xiaoling is in disbelief. She clearly remembers that before she passed out, she just made a messy mark on the ID. Look, the mark is still there, but what happened to the extra signature on it? I didn't sign this word, Xiaoling said angrily. Pei Ziyan's voice was very gentle. Everything is signed and registered in the system. From now on, you are my legal wife and no one can change it. Xiaoling shook her head and refused to admit it. The handwriting is fake. How could she just marry him and be forced to sign without anyone asking her if she was willing? Pei Ziyan was not upset. You can go for handwriting appraisal. Xiaoling was desperate. The signature on the marriage certificate was very similar to her own handwriting. She guessed that Pei Ziyan signed it on her behalf. Thinking back to when Pei Ziyan taught her to write step by step, there was not much difference in their handwriting, so they could make it look exactly the same without putting too much effort into imitating it. Even if a handwriting appraisal is performed, it may be difficult to distinguish between authenticity and fakeness. You are so despicable, Xiaoling said. But Pei Ziyan said, I promised you that I would allow the evil seed in your belly to be born. You also promised me that you would marry me. It is fair and reasonable, and you are willing to fight or suffer. If you want to go back on it, I can go back on it. This sentence again. Xiaoling was silent. Suddenly feeling her mood waning, she turned her back and stopped talking to Pei Ziyan. Pei Ziyan sat by the bed for a while. Seeing that her condition was relatively stable, he got up and left. Outside the ward, Chu Chen arrived at some unknown time and waited outside the ward door with the driver. He has always been extremely attentive to serving his master. Whenever his master has something to do, he will appear there. At this time, he said to Pei Ziyan respectfully, Congratulations, boss, happy wedding and a happy marriage for 100 years. Pei Ziyan looked at this loyal subordinate, and his original melancholy mood became much better. A smile appeared on the corner of his lips, and he said that he would go to the personnel department to receive the red envelope tomorrow. Chu Chen also smiled, thanked him, and asked jokingly, Do you have any wedding candy? Yes, why not? Pei Ziyan said, the whole company distributed it, by the way, and, he paused slightly, the smile on his lips disappeared, and his eyes became a little gloomy. Send a copy to Li Lei. What does the boss want to do? Demonstration. Chu Chen was a little surprised. How many years has the boss? No, he has never done such a childish thing. It seemed that Ye Xingling was indeed different, and she held a heavy weight in the boss's heart. Chu Chen thought about it, lowered his head, and said yes. Li Lei has been in a bad mood recently. There are overwhelming reports in the media about the marriage of Xiaoling and Pei Ziyan. There are also many photos taken from various angles. They walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau side by side, and Pei Ziyan walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau holding Xiaoling. Blocking the camera for her, looking affectionate. He tore up all the newspapers and threw them into the trash can. Outside the office, someone knocked on the door. Come in. Li Lei's tone was unkind. The person who came in was Sutang, holding a large beautifully wrapped gift box in his hand. Master, your express delivery, she said to Li Lei with an elegant posture and the softest voice. Originally, she had been transferred far away by Li Lei. Fortunately, the business war between Tianyi and the emperor had become fierce a few days ago, and the manpower around Li Lei was insufficient, so she was transferred back and continued to work as a special assistant. Sutang has always been a very smart woman, very sensible. She knew that she had greatly offended Li Lei by framing Xiaoling last time, so she was extremely cautious when she returned this time and never mentioned anything about Xiaoling in front of Li Lei. It's just that this time, this matter cannot be avoided. When she stepped into the front hall of Tianyi today, a large circle of people gathered around the front desk. She frowned and was impatient as to why the group of people were blocking the road, when she heard a clerk shout out happily, "Assistant Sotii, it's Assistant Sotii." A large group of people looked at her with different looks, which suddenly gave her a very bad feeling. "What's wrong?" she asked with an elegant posture. "Over there, there is the boss's express delivery." One of the clerks pointed to the front desk. Sutang looked in the direction he pointed and saw a large, luxuriously packaged gift box on the marble table at the front desk. It was about the size of a person's arms. It was gorgeous and shiny, studded with pearls and roses, and decorated with pink lace. There is a big heart balloon on the top of the lid. Strong princess style. This is the young master's express delivery. Sutang almost fainted. No matter how you look at it, the young master doesn't match the style. The girl at the front desk stood up respectfully and said softly to Sutang, "This is a wedding candy sent by the emperor." The sentence was very short, but Sutang instantly understood why so many people were watching. Recently, the news that Emperor's chairman Pei Xian and its actress Ye Xingling went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get their certificates has spread a lot. Everyone knows that Li Lei is Ye Xingling's ex-boyfriend, so the newlyweds sent wedding candies. Are you here to show your love and demonstrate? What kind of hatred or resentment? Sutang has a headache. The young master has been in a bad mood these days. If he sees such a big box of wedding candies again, he might go crazy. She really didn't want to get into trouble, so she immediately told the girl at the front desk, "Go and throw away this wedding candy, don't let the boss see it." The girl at the front desk looked at her with some embarrassment. "What's wrong?" Sutang frowned slightly. The girl at the front desk muttered, "The boss has specifically ordered that you are not allowed to intercept anything handed to him. He said that he will handle it himself." Sutang was startled for a moment, and then his expression became as cold as jade. "What's wrong with Li Lei? Don't you trust her? In the past, when she was serving him, she had the right to choose what to report and what not to report, but what about now? Even if he let her back, would he still become so guarded and unfamiliar?" This is the 10th chapter of the early morning update. The update is complete. Good night everyone. The next update will be at 8 o'clock in the morning. See you there. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 458. Chapter 458. Li Lei's Call. It's all Ye Xingling's fault. Sutang looked at the box of wedding candies decorated with lace and pink hearts, and sincerely wished her and Pei Xian a happy marriage, so that they would never bother her young master again. Perhaps given time, the young master can forget about her. Accept yourself. Sutang thought this way and felt that it was not a bad thing for Ye Xingling and Pei Xian to get married. On the side, the girl at the front desk urged, "Assistant Su, please bring this box of wedding candies to the boss. The pile at the door is too eye-catching." There were many people coming and going near the front desk, and this box of wedding candies had long been attracted. How many people gathered around to watch, and all the gossip in the company depended on it. The girl at the front desk is very melancholy. She is all stuck here, which affects her work very much. Sutang really didn't want to give it away. This box of wedding candies is obviously to cause trouble for Li Lei. Whoever gives it to him will be in trouble. Sutang frowned and asked, "Where is Tan Ying, now?" Although she has returned to Li Lei, Tan Ying has not been transferred. In other words, there are two special assistants around Li Lei, one of whom is her. One is Tan Ying. Those who are qualified to hand something to Li Lei are besides her and Tan Ying. Tan's special assistant came into the company just now and saw this box of wedding candies, and then, he said he remembered that he had to fly to Tokyo for something urgent, so he left in a hurry. The girl at the front desk said. No matter how well-mannered Sutang was, she was so angry that her face turned black at this moment. Why fly to Tokyo in an emergency? Tan Ying made it clear that she didn't want to send wedding candies, so she made an excuse to avoid it. Assistant Su, you must be in an emergency if you don't want to come back, the girl at the front desk asked cautiously. Sutang. She really wanted something urgent to happen, but her wishes didn't come true. Her most urgent thing now was that she had to take a document to Lilei's office to sign, and she couldn't avoid it no matter what. She cursed her bad luck in her heart and picked up the box of wedding candies resignedly. At the moment, she was standing in Lilei's office, putting the box of wedding candies on the sofa by the window, turning around without leaving a trace, taking out the documents that required Lilei's signature, and sending them to his desk. Master, there is still this document that needs to be signed. Lilei signed a few words and asked Sutang casually, what is the express delivery you brought in? Sutang was quiet for a moment and then said, I don't know if it's wrapped in a big box. Master, please slowly unpack it while I go out first. After that, he quickly exited the office. Lilei didn't pay attention and walked directly to the sofa to open the express delivery. However, after just one glance, his movements stopped. On the large ornate pink box, there is an eye-catching card, which reads, Mr. Pei Xian and Miss Ye Xingling are celebrating their wedding anniversary. They will be united forever and have a happy marriage for 100 years. Lilei's face was tense, and he looked at those words intently. No wonder Sutang ran so fast just now. Why didn't he know what was delivered? Pei Xian, Ye Xingling. To tie the knot. The words on the small card were extremely dazzling, and they gradually blurred and disappeared in front of his eyes. He remembered that a long time ago, she was robbed of her marriage. He led a whole team of people to rescue her. They descended from the sky majestically and carried her to safety in one breath. At that time, she was wearing a white wedding dress and softly agreed to be his girlfriend. He felt that he was the happiest person in the world. But, what now? What will be the consequences if he goes to steal the marriage on the day she gets the certificate on Chinese Valentine's Day? He had known for a long time that she was getting the certificate that day, but he did not try to steal the marriage because he finally understood one thing. The reason why the marriage was successful at that time was not because of how powerful he was, but because she was willing to go with him. But this time, she won't do it. She has been married to another man forever. These 4 words were magnified in front of his eyes, making him breathless. He reached out, fumbled for a lighter, lit the small card, and burned it. He pressed the phone and called Sutang to come in. Get rid of it? He didn't say clearly what it was, but Sutang knew that he was referring to the box of wedding candies. Sutang carefully answered yes, hesitated for a moment, and then persuaded, Master, you will find someone more worthy of love. Lilei gave her a cold look. He rarely looked at people with such fierce eyes. Sutang's heart skipped a beat when he saw it, and he quickly stopped talking, not daring to say anything. Get out, he gave the order to expel the guests. Sutang knew that he was in a bad mood and did not dare to stay any longer. He quickly took the large box of wedding candies and went out. The office door is closed. Lilei lay on the sofa for a long time before dialing Pei Xian's phone number. Pei Xian was sunbathing with Xiaoling when a pleasant ringtone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Lilei, and he couldn't help but feel a little strange. More of a warning, why would a loser in love call him? Glancing at Xiaoling beside him, Pei Xian stood up and walked far away before answering the call. Be nice to her, Lilei got straight to the point, otherwise, I will take her back at any time. It's just you, Pei Xian's voice was still gentle and condescending, she won't leave with you with that oath, Xiaoling would only stay by his side. Lilei, you can give it a try. Pei Xian snorted coldly and hung up the phone. But I couldn't help but feel a little irritated. It felt really bad to have a love rival staring at me. Although he maintained a very high attitude on the phone, he knew very well in his heart who was the real loser, whose flesh and blood Xiaoling was carrying in her belly. Based on this alone, he was completely defeated. Victory in front of others is only in front of others. He put down the phone, turned around, and saw Xiaoling. Xiaoling followed him at some point. She put a hand on her belly and looked at him with a desolate expression. She heard some of the phone call just now and guessed who was calling. She missed Li Lei so much, the biological father of the child, that she listened eagerly to Pei Xian's words and guessed what Li Lei said on the other end of the phone. She said to the child silently in her heart, "Baby, that is your biological father. As far away as the end of the world." Pei Xian's face darkened and he warned her, "Don't eavesdrop on my phone calls in the future." Xiaoling bit her lip and said nothing, watching Pei Xian pass by. "My belly is getting bigger day by day. She doesn't go to the emperor's company very much anymore. When she goes there once in a while, when people see her, they all respectfully step aside by the roadside and lower their heads and call her Madam. The artists who used to secretly compete with her no longer compete with her. Marrying into a wealthy family is a very obvious dividing line. There is a saying that goes well, when you are far beyond your peers, they will no longer be jealous and can only look up to you. Xiaoling doesn't like to be treated like this, as if she is an alien. However, now that the matter has come to this, what else can be done? With Pei Xian, he returned to the family once. The elders in the clan don't like her very much, but because she is pregnant, they can't openly embarrass her. On the contrary, they have to be cautious in providing food, which makes them feel very aggrieved. They sincerely wished that she was carrying a daughter, because a despicable person like her was not worthy of giving birth to a son for Pei Xian. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 459. Chapter 459 Send Back. Xiaoling knew in her previous life how the elders of the Pei family treated civilian girls, so she was not surprised to see them being lukewarm now. She didn't care anyway. Even if she gave birth to a son, she didn't want her son to inherit the Pei family business. It didn't matter what they thought of her. Pei Xian also hopes that she can give birth to a daughter, which is better than giving birth to Li Lei's eldest son, although Li Lei will never know the existence of this son. Unfortunately, Xiaoling went to the hospital for a checkup and found out that she was carrying a baby boy. Xiaoling's mood was a little complicated. She originally hoped to give birth to a baby girl, because a baby girl might not resemble her father as much as a baby boy, and Pei Xian would not know who the child's biological father was. However, now, the secret of the child's life experience has been revealed, and it doesn't matter whether he looks like Li Lei or not. On the contrary, giving birth to a baby boy would better place her thoughts on Li Lei. She was happy in her heart, caressing her belly gently, with a satisfied smile on her face. Pei Xian's expression was gloomy, and he secretly made up his mind to send the child away as soon as he was born. Pei Xian couldn't tolerate a little beast who looked very much like his love rival occupying his woman. On the way home, Xiaoling didn't know what he was thinking, so she raised her face and said to him, "It's time to change many of the baby products in the house. Get rid of the dolls and small flowers and buy some boys' things." Pei Xian originally wanted to say, "What is the need for a child who will be sent away as soon as he is born?" However, looking at the faint happy smile on her face, I suddenly thought, why should I say these words to create a conflict in vain? The same goes for sending her child away directly after she is born. So he said, "Ask the driver to accompany you." In fact, as early as the last time he accompanied Xiaoling to purchase baby girl products, he had already bought some things for boys without telling her. However, those things were prepared for the heirs of the Pei family, and the one in her belly belonged to Li Lei. His evil seed is unworthy. Pei Xian didn't plan to accompany her on shopping trips anymore. Xiaoling knew in her heart that he was doing the best he could by letting the driver accompany her. The next day, accompanied by her driver, she went out to buy a lot of things and replaced all the girls' belongings in the nursery. In fact, she didn't know much about what boys liked, so she had to follow Lilei's hobbies and bought some toy cars, toy guns, and a furry leopard doll. He is Lilei's son, so he should also like it. When Pei Xian saw these things, his face became even more gloomy. He threw the leopard doll out. Even the toy cars and toy guns were not spared and were swept into the trash can. Xiaoling glared at him. Pei Xian, what are you doing? Pei Xian said, Xiaoling, I know what you have in mind, but you cannot miss that man in any way around me. I will prepare toys for your son. These are not allowed. Xiaoling fell silent. As expected, Pei Xian prepared toys for his children. A quick look at them revealed that they were completely unintentional. They were cheap building blocks and airplanes, and they didn't know what materials they were made of. They had a pungent smell. Xiaoling refused. These toys are not environmentally friendly and will cause harm to the baby. Pei Xian sneered, after you send him away, how can he be as comfortable as living here when he goes to someone else's house? He must adapt to civilian life as soon as possible. Xiaoling's heart skipped a beat. She thought of her previous agreement with Pei Xian, and her heart froze, and she asked, can we not? No. Pei Xian interrupted her without thinking. Please, she said softly. Pei Xian looked at her coldly, abort or send away, you can choose again. Xiaoling's face turned pale and her expression gradually became desperate. She cherishes every minute and every second while the child is in her belly, as if every day's gathering is God's mercy and a luxury. She was full of thoughts and her body was getting thinner and thinner. Zhou's mother looked very worried and said to her, Madam, you can't go on like this, you won't be able to bear the baby in your belly. You need to be healthier and stronger. Although, she already knew that the baby in her belly was not her husband's biological flesh and blood, but it was a human life after all. Out of maternal instinct, she couldn't bear to see her wife and child getting weaker day by day. Xiaoling also felt that this was not going to work. Her mood was too depressed, so in order to change her mood, she sometimes went to the Emperor Company to find Feng Kun to relieve her boredom. Feng Kun asked her what was on her mind. She told Feng Kun about her current situation and asked sadly, am I unable to watch this child grow up? What will he become like in the future? Will he be sent to Pei Xian? What kind of people are you going to? Feng Kun pondered for a long time. Xiaoling, although you can't stop Pei Xian from sending the child away, can you let him send the child back to Lilei? That way, it is better than sending the whole family away randomly. Send the child back to Lilei? Xiaoling's eyes lit up slightly. This was a good idea. Lilei was so gentle and kind, so he must be a good father. However, this joy only lasted for a short moment, and her mood darkened again. I can't let Lilei know about the existence of the child. Only by eliminating Lilei's thoughts can he get married and have children, forget about me, and live his own peaceful life. Feng Kun felt sad in his heart. The little girl who was so arrogant and willful in her previous life now knew how to make such a huge sacrifice. She would rather bear all the pain silently to make the people she loves happy. Such a growth, what a painful price it has been. He was a little sad, but he couldn't continue to persuade her. After all, this kind of matter was too personal and everyone had different ways of handling it. Even if he could make suggestions as a friend, he couldn't make the decision for her. Feng Kun gently patted Xiaoling's shoulder, think carefully. No matter what the final decision is, I will always be on your side. Thank you, Akin, Xiaoling said softly. She returned to the villa and spent many days thinking about her conversation with Feng Kun, but she was still hesitant. Should she send the child back to Lilei? How would Lilei react if he knew this child was his? Will it trigger a series of butterfly effects, causing him to start rescuing her again? Thinking too much will make the fetal image a little unstable. Having experienced almost miscarriage several times, Xiaoling was now very careful and quickly forced herself not to think about these problems. She carefully arranged the pregnancy and spent much more thought than ordinary pregnant women to finally save him. The birth of this child was very difficult, and it was not easy. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 460. Chapter 460 Expected date of delivery. Unknowingly, the due date came and she was admitted to the hospital ahead of schedule. Her physical condition was still not good, and the doctor suggested that she choose a cesarean section. But Xiaoling refused to listen. She heard that natural birth was better for the child, so she would rather suffer more than to give birth to the child naturally. Pei Xian was originally firmly opposed to her having a natural birth. He didn't care whether the child would be healthy or not, he only cared about whether her life would be in danger. Chu Chen, on the other hand, said to him, "Actually, it's not bad for Madame to choose a natural birth. After the natural birth, her physical condition will recover quickly, and you will be able to give birth to another child with her soon." This sentence fits exactly what Pei Xian had in mind. Hence, he agreed to Xiaoling's request for a natural delivery. That night, Xiaoling in the ward felt a vague pain in her lower abdomen. She felt very uncomfortable. She guessed that the child was about to have a seizure, so she pushed the nanny who was accompanying her on the bed and asked her to find someone. The nanny hurriedly called the doctor and reported to Pei Xian. The doctor checked Xiaoling and said, "The birth canal hasn't been opened yet, so you're waiting in the ward. It's still early for the baby to be born." He also told her not to yell and to conserve her strength as much as possible until the baby is actually born. Only when can you gain strength? Xiaoling listened to the doctor's words very seriously, and she could endure the pain no matter how severe it was. The doctor is out. There was only a nanny by her side in the VIP ward. Pei Xian didn't come. This was not his child. He didn't care. He even wanted to let the child die during childbirth. It was okay if he didn't come, otherwise, Xiaoling felt that she would have to worry about Pei Xian plotting to harm the child while giving birth in pain. The pain came in waves, and she gradually couldn't think. It was as if she and the bursts of pain were the only ones left in the world. She was in a daze, holding tightly the amulet she secretly carried with her, the amulet made of sycamore wood. She held it warmly, and the birthday and birth dates written on it in ancient characters seemed to give her strength. It was as if Lilei was accompanying their mother and son. The sky gradually turned fish-belly white. Pei Xian received a call from the nanny at night. He didn't plan to go to the hospital to see Xiaoling, but after hanging up the phone, he couldn't sleep well for the rest of the night. When he closed his eyes, his heart and mind were filled with concern for her. He was very irritable. He got up early in the morning and asked the driver to go to the hospital. He glanced at Xiaoling from a distance through the window of the ward and asked the doctor, "How is she doing?" The doctor said, "Looking at the situation, I won't be able to give birth for a while, and I'm afraid I won't be able to enter the delivery room until tonight or tomorrow." This is how a woman gives birth to a baby. It goes very smoothly when it goes well, and it's very frustrating when it doesn't go well. Pei Xian looked at her painful expression through the glass. It was really strange. It was obviously not his child, it was obviously her own fault, but why did his heart tighten and hurt? The doctor looked at his appearance and asked carefully, "Mr. Pei, do you want to go in and see Mrs. Pei? Other husbands are extremely nervous when their wives give birth, especially when they give birth to their firstborn baby, and they can't wait to accompany them. Be there for your wife and do your best for her." However, the Mr. Pei in front of him seemed to be a little too calm. Even when he arrived in front of the ward, he didn't even have the intention to go in and say a word of encouragement to his wife. Pei Xian hesitated when he heard the doctor's question. He didn't know what attitude to use to face her in the ward. Should he go in and encourage her so that she could give birth to a child who was not hers safely and healthily? He didn't think he could be so open-minded. Xiaoling in the ward looked increasingly painful. Another wave of intense pain hit her. She felt as if her body was being pulled continuously and torn into pieces. Her mind became more and more trance-like, and she just subconsciously clenched the amulet in her hand. "Will you die here?" She thought vaguely. No, with Lilei's amulet, she would not die. She must live well, give birth to a child, and protect him. "Mr. Pei, let's go in and have a look," the doctor said. "Women are very fragile at this time and need the comfort and support of their husbands. I have seen too many couples change their relationship because of a childbirth. Many a husband who doesn't care about his wife at such a time is resented by his wife. There are also many husbands who are considerate of their wives at such a time, which makes their wives follow him even more wholeheartedly." Pei Xian's heart moved slightly when he said these words. Although he didn't care about the child, he did care about whether Xiaoling would follow him wholeheartedly. Seeing that her face turned pale in pain, he pushed open the ward door and walked in. "Sir," when the nanny saw him, she quickly stood up and respectfully gave up her seat next to the hospital bed. "Madam, sir, I'm here to see you," she said to Xiaoling, who was already semi-conscious in pain on the bed. Xiaoling vaguely knew that Pei Xian was coming, but she didn't have the energy to care at all. All her attention was focused on the pain that attacked fiercely. She had always been so afraid of pain, even if it was broken by a rose thorn. Fingers will also act coquettishly in front of their loved ones with tears in their eyes for a long time. But now, no matter how great the pain is, you can only bear it yourself. She ignored Pei Xian and kept fighting with the pain. "How is the cervix opening?" she asked, breathless. The nanny took a look and said, "It's still early." "I'm afraid it's not even a finger wide." This nanny had given birth to a child before and knew that it had to be at least 3 fingers wide before she could advance into the delivery room. She said to Xiaoling, "Madam, if you don't bear it any longer, woman, who wouldn't go through this?" Xiaoling had no energy to say anything else, and the sweat on her forehead kept falling. Pei Xian took a white towel to wipe her sweat and said to her warmly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Xiaoling shrank slightly. She felt even more uneasy after seeing him coming. Now she was lying on the bed unable to move. It would be easy for him to harm her child. She didn't dare to express her worries for fear of angering him, but her face became even paler. Pei Xian thought she was in pain and reached out to hold her hand. "Just scream if it hurts," he said. It's okay, because he didn't care about the child. He didn't study the knowledge of childbirth. He didn't know that according to the doctor's instructions, he shouldn't waste energy by yelling at this time. Hearing what he said, Xiaoling thought he was trying to kill the child, and her heart tightened even more tightly. She held the amulet tightly in her hand, praying that the amulet would give her the strength to get through this obstacle smoothly and safely. Pei Xian felt as if she was holding something in her hand. Her fists were tightly clenched, and he couldn't help but open her hand to see what was going on. He was stronger than her, so he broke it open without much effort. When he saw it, his face suddenly changed color. It turned out to be the amulet given to her by Lilei. End of this chapter.